Let's welcome ASI's Chris Ruvo, our digital news director, for a session on the three hottest topics in promo right now: supply chain, inventory, and shipping. Chris?
Thanks, Tim, and welcome everyone. Let's jump into the supply chain issues that are plaguing promo in virtually all industries and discuss causes, mitigation strategies, and when things might improve. Here to help are two top-notch experts. Jing Rong is VP of Supply Chain and Compliance at top 40 supplier HPG. She has extensive experience in global sourcing. Robert Antashak, Senior Advisor and founding member of Vidalia Mills, is a sourcing ace with more than 30 years of experience in the fiber, textile, and apparel industries. Throughout this session, feel free to ask our experts questions in the chat at the right. We're also putting up a poll in the chat. Just click polls to take it. So without further ado, let's jump in. Jing, Bob, thank you for being with me. First question would be, what steps can importers take to best mitigate the supply chain issues that we're facing? And Jing, maybe we can start with you.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me. Okay. So I think a lot of speaker prior to this session has set the right tone. Get the orders to your importer, but the importer needs to get a purchase order to your overseas supplier today. Okay. Double your pre-COVID supplier lead time and transit lead time into your purchasing cycle. Okay. And if the current electric shortage start to impact your supplier production capabilities, you need to work with supplier to schedule your best selling product to be made ahead of your lower selling product. And also note that Chinese New Year is February 1st of 2022, a lot sooner than prior year, okay? Which means a lot of supplier will close its factory middle to early January, okay? So you need to get these shipments on the water prior to shut down their factory. Okay. Also, try to use different vessels, different origin ports, different destination ports to ship your product. Okay. This will help reduce the chance where bulk of inventory are stuck at one port or on one ship. And lastly, if you have friends at Walmart and Home Depot, it's time to call them right now, because you can then smoosh your way onto their private charter vessel and get your product sooner.
That's a good call to make if you can, for sure, Jing. That was great. Bob, what advice would you have for importers to just get that product stateside?
Yeah, Chris, one of the things that I've noticed was, and we noticed this last year, was that actually the import numbers were, particularly in apparel and textiles, were really surging at a time when it looked like the market wasn't going anywhere. And that was a lot of people doing exactly what Jing was talking about. They were really getting ahead of orders, and they were very successful at doing that. I think along with that has what necessitates what's necessary for everyone is the willingness to keep stuff in warehouses for a little bit longer than they're accustomed to. The just-in-time delivery system has broken. Okay, I think everyone has to be realistic about that. The what worked before, it worked great. I mean, it was fine. It worked for goodness gracious, probably 30 years it built up, and longer maybe. But I think it took a pandemic to show really how brittle it was and how, again, imbalances work their way into the system. So when you have a sudden surge in demand like we've had, it takes time to reawaken an industry, any industry. It's like trying to start a cold engine from scratch. It just takes a while. And along with that, your whole strategy, I think Jing is right on target. Diversification is going to be really essential, and just having one or two sources of supply just doesn't cut it anymore, or at least in this environment, it doesn't cut it. It may change over the long haul, but I would say, yeah, diversification is really kind of key.
All right, so that's kind of some of the medicine you could apply if you're an importer. But just to give people some perspective, I think folks are certainly familiar with some of the causes, but maybe not all of them. Can we jump into some of those root causes of what's causing all this supply chain disruption? And Bob, do you want to get us going with that?
Yeah, sure, Chris. Again, I think we're looking at several things at once, and it'd be nice if it was just one thing, but it's not. So what we're finding is that definitely there's an imbalance in the market that was created by a combination of economic stimulus that helped to prop up demand. It helped to create this very sharp rebound. It's interesting, though, when you look at it, the consumption numbers are really just returning back to historical means. actually. But we were so low, and the industry, any industry, cut their capacity so short. Okay. In the case of apparel, as you may remember a year ago, a lot of brands were really getting beat up because they were canceling contracts. Okay. Now they made up for that in a lot of cases, and they ended up bringing in a lot of basics, and they brought them in a hurry. And this was before the port bottlenecks started. Okay. Because they were worried about, basically the holiday season. And for me, waiting for the holiday season and seeing how that goes will be really kind of telling, I think, in terms of how it makes it or not. Other issues that we have that really everyone should be looking at is this inflation item that's going on. If you look at the data, look at import data, prices are actually falling in apparel. Okay. Yet at the same time, inflation's running up. What's causing that? A couple of factors, really. You've got loose monetary policy, okay, which was propping up the economy. You've got that. You also have the fact is that the shipping lines, it's costing them more to actually get product out the door. And they're dealing with basically every delay is at a cost, to a point now where, to Jing's point, get on board with Walmart. Yeah, that's an expensive way of doing it, but it'll work. Okay. But the point is, it goes to show you how much inflation has worked its way into the system.
Gotcha. Jing, what are you seeing as some of these root causes of the supply chain disruption we're experiencing?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Bob that there's not a single reason. I think there were many long-term, short-term issues over the last few years that all basically intercept into this perfect storm that we're experiencing. Okay. I know a lot of people like to blame COVID for all the supply chain issue that we're having. But if we look at the data, so I just pull some quick data out of Port of Long Beach. Through the end of August, okay, they turn over 8,752 TEU. Okay. Back through end of August, that means only 3/4 was over 8,000. Prior to COVID, 2019, the entire year, Long Beach turned over 7,632.
Wow.
Okay, so that's 14, almost 15% up compared to just 3/4. So there's actually a lot more product being shipped into the U.S., which then caused us port congestion, which will cause this labor shortage. The symptoms were the things that we're hearing on the news are symptoms of imbalance, demand and supply. Okay, but we need to start addressing a lot of these, long-term, short-term issue for these symptoms to go away.
That's and that's a bigger discussion, I think, for sure. Because I think you've seen, to your point, I think you've seen such a shift whereas in the past maybe people were spending their money, their disposable income, on services or entertainment of some kind. But now they're pumping it all into products. So that's part of what's bringing so much of that volume to the ports, which kind of leads nicely into the next question I have. And Jing, I'll start with you, which is, why can't we get back to par, so to speak, with the supply chain? Why can't it recover and kind of get back to the efficiency we might have been used to before?
Oh my gosh, I think it's almost 17 months now. I'm not sure how many of the participants are still working from home. I think even after COVID is over, I doubt everybody's going back to the office full time. Okay, which I believe. So I really don't believe we're ever going back to normal. Okay, there are just too many uncertainty at play here. Such as the political environment between U.S. and China. Right, the tension between China and Taiwan, the supply chain diversification out of our other regions of Asia, global carbon neutral commitment. There's just too many things that it might have dragged on for quite a while in the past, but because they are in the forefront of people's mind, people want to make a quick decision and put it into it. So all these tensions or I wouldn't call it conflict or uncertainties will play a role to determine what the future look like.
Okay? So we're not going back to what it was. There's going to be an all new reality. Do you think that reality will at least be close to some of the efficiency we were used to? Or are we going to be dealing with port bottlenecks forever? Or
so our current well-oiled supply chain took almost 20 plus year to get to the stage, right? I know Walmart knows come April, they need to place order for their Black Friday and Christmas shopping crowd. So China, South Asia supplier knows to start working overtime in the summer to build up their inventory. Everything's out of the window right now. So I think it will take a while to re-oil this machine, in my opinion.
All right. Well said, Bob. Do you have anything to add to that? Just why is it so difficult to get back to that efficiency we were once used to?
Well, Chris, again, I think to Jing's point, a lot of the problems had started prior to COVID. Okay, COVID kind of accelerated it. Okay, and I think the solution that's starting to gel, at least in my business, is regionalization as a solution. So true global supply chains of 20,000 miles in length, multiple countries, a t-shirt or a jean can go through 4 or 5 countries before it comes back to the US, for example. Those days, for environmental reasons and economic reasons and so forth, may be over, at least for the time being. And again, I think what a lot of companies are doing is they're looking to source closer to the consuming market. So whether it's the US or China or Europe, there's a renewed interest in trying to find local, not necessarily in-country manufacturers, because like in the case of the U.S., it's kind of rare. Like in our case with Vidalia, we are very rare. I mean, we are the first U.S. mill in probably 50 years. Okay, and so that's really, really rare. But having said all that, it helps to illustrate the point that closer you are, the shorter your supply chains, also the ability of being able to ship through different ports than the usual. Again, the usual pattern was pretty much a cookie cutter kind of solution. Things were very efficient. They worked great until they didn't. And when they didn't, everybody didn't know. And all of a sudden, their hair's on fire, And to be honest with you, it's going to take a while for the smoke to clear the room. And I think that part of the solution will be with regionalization.
Got it. And by regionalization, you mean bringing production maybe to this hemisphere, your Central America, stuff closer to quote North America, the North American end markets.
Yeah.
We've had some questions come in from the audience. Maybe we could address one of them now. A couple of them revolve around the power outages, the power rationing that's occurring in China, and maybe the one big one here is when do you think the Chinese government is gonna I guess relent a bit on its policy and allow power to flow back out in a way that allows factories to maximize production? Any ideas?
So I have been following on this topic very closely because, it significantly impacts, the northern part of China, where I'm from, of course. I really don't think there's too much the government can do. Okay. There's also several things happen around this issue. So, how we got to this, electricity rationing is due to several reasons. Number one, okay, because this a lot of country in Southeast Asia was closed due to the second wave of COVID, a lot of those demand flow back into China. So their demand for electricity increased significantly compared to the prior months. So they used up coal a lot faster to power electricity, compared to before. Number two is that China government sets a maximum for electricity rate, okay? But they do not control how much the electricity company buy coal from the coal factory, what price it is. So right now, every watts of electricity that the electric company produce, actually they lose money.
They're losing money on it.
Yes, it's not that they don't want to produce. They're basically, in my opinion, is trying to force the government to allow electricity to raise to market rate, so they can then produce, electricity at a profit. I want to say a week ago, the China government has stated they are they're doing all they can to ensure that there's electricity for their residents during the winter season. But I'm not sure if any of you guys are following. Shanxi, which is the largest coal producer for coal in China, is having a 1,000-year flood. Okay, so a lot of
because of course that's the last 2 years. Yeah.
Exactly. So when it rains, it pours. So now
Literally.
they couldn't even. So the electric company can't even buy coal domestically. So they actually now have to go to the international market to procure coal to power their plant. So there's many things that's happening at the same time. So that is why, in my opinion, again, I really don't think the government can do much. They can't demand electricity to be turned on. What they can do is allow electricity rate to raise, to allow electric company to buy coal on the entire global market to make electricity, and hoping that we are going to see some kind of improvement come November. I'm hoping.
Okay. All right. So my big takeaway from that was maybe by November we're going to see some improvements in the electricity situation in China. But those electricity producers might be paying more to produce what they do and having to then sell at higher rates, right? Which is going to come down to factories, and factory costs then go up, which ultimately can make its way into product input costs. So just something to keep on everybody's radar. Let me ask you guys though, kind of taking into the promotional products distributor. We've kind of mentioned it a bit, but what can the promotional products distributor do, to kind of best navigate this situation with everything from inventory shortfalls to just, trying to service your customer at a very difficult time?
Diversification.
Okay. Go ahead, Robbie, or Bob, we can start with you. Sure.
No, diversification is really the key. Sourcing, distribution, every aspect of it. Look at smaller ports. Look at different modes of transportation. Fly that helicopter in. I mean, the fact of the matter is, some of the choices are not great, but there are some choices that are out there. Walmart, for example, took the blunt instrument approach. They just went off and bought their own shipping line, in effect. Okay, not everyone has that luxury, but the reality of it is that's probably the only way to get it through right now. In their case. In the case of much smaller companies who are dealing with a different industry, my sense of it is, if my industry is any gauge, okay, and a lot of the products that we bring in end up in the promotional industry, okay, they're scouring the countryside right now. They're looking in countries they never even thought of, okay. And the fact of the matter is, there are a lot of people who are looking to diversify away from what had been the large suppliers, because there's just all these problems. And something I would add to Jing's point about the electricity issue. I mean, the policy of the Chinese government had been for many, many years. I first went to China when the only mode of transportation was a bicycle. Okay, so I'm dating myself. Okay, but the reality is, government policy, particularly over the last 5 to 10 years, has been to de-emphasize manufacturing. Okay, and move into high tech, move into different and consumer economics. So the point is, when I hear about power shortages, I'm a little cynical in the sense of that's another quiet shove out the door for traditional manufacturing. Maybe not all. I'm not saying all manufacturing, but certainly stepping stone manufacturing like textiles or apparel, for goodness sake.
Yeah, or high energy consuming manufacturing.
Exactly. Well put. Well put.
Gotcha. All right, we're running a little close on time, so let me ask you then. I think this is maybe the big question everybody's very interested in. When do you kind of see all these supply chain pressures starting to ease? I know not rectified overnight. That's not going to happen. But when do you see them starting to ease a bit? Some of the crunch at ports starting to relent, inventory replenishment starting to happen a little more efficiently. Is there a time frame on that?
Bob, who's going to take our crystal ball out? You or me?
I was going to say, if you have one, now's the time to get it out. Yeah.
Whoever wants. King, if you want to start, go right ahead. Otherwise,
all right. I think it's just too many uncertainty at this time. Okay, like I said, no electricity shortages. No, China so far already had 3 COVID cluster flare up as well. So that's another uncertainty that's in the horizon, right? Chinese New Year, that's happening Q1 of next year. If I have to guess, again, nobody, take a bet or, go get lottery on this. I really don't think anything, I don't expect improvement at least until summer of 2022. And that's just my guess based on what I'm seeing today.
All right, fair enough. Bob, how about you?
Chris, I think first let me preface it by saying we have to keep an eye on inflation, okay. In the consuming market, number one. If inflation really jumps, then we're going to have a supply-demand imbalance the other way. Okay, you'll have all these companies building up production, and suddenly inflation will put a damper on consumer demand. Okay, in countries like U.S. or Europe. Okay, so it kind of cuts back both ways. I want to really see how the holiday season goes in our business before making a firm assessment. I still think, having said that, I think Jing has a good sense. It's at least the middle of next year, if not to the following holiday season. Okay. I mean, I think we're still a year out. And again, a lot of that will depend on a lot of macroeconomic forces that are at play right now.
All right, fair enough. Fair enough. We'll go to our poll results soon, just to kind of see what everybody else thought on when things might start to rectify. Jing, Bob, I'll ask you one more question, and that's this. What new best practices do you think will emerge from all this supply chain disruption? Because usually when we have upheaval, right, we tend to learn things just out of necessity, and maybe learn them a lot faster than we would when we're kind of just in a state of complacency. So what might be some of these best practices that emerge? And Bob, we'll start with you.
Well, I think, Chris, I think some of what have been considered to be the standard ways of doing business will obviously change. It has to. I mean, for the benefit, to some degree, the sourcing community got a little lazy. Okay. Lazy, not because they weren't getting their product or getting good product. They were. But lazy in the sense of being creative in terms of how they do their sourcing in the long haul. Back in the old days in apparel, there were import quotas. Trade was restricted. The sourcing people were really clever about how they did their sourcing. You don't have that anymore. So instead, you have very good manufacturers, very good suppliers, consistent demand. How can you blame them? Well, again, I think that's a mistake to assume that's going to be the way of operating business going forward. Okay, they're going to have to get creative. They're going to also have to unlearn some of the things they learned in school. Okay, with regard to sourcing. Okay, and I think it's going to be a very practical kind of approach to locating suppliers and meeting demand.
Very good. How about you, Jing?
I totally agree with Bob. I think the promo industry, especially in the hard goods and technology sector, relies too heavily in China. Okay, it's going to be very difficult, but everyone is going to start, looking out or start diversify their supply chain. On October 9th, Walmart actually made an announcement that they're moving their company's global supplier business unit from China to India, effective immediately. Okay,
really?
This does not mean that Walmart is trying to move its supplier base out of China, but it does show that Walmart is actively trying to diversify its supply chain. And I expect many retailer to follow his example. On a positive note for the promo industry, if Walmart establish a robust supply chain, we can tap into that opportunity and start using their supply chain.
Because it compels that infrastructure creation, and then, hey, they build the road, everyone can drive over.
Everybody
right?
come.
So you can make the trucks. All right, very, very good. I'll share this real quick. We had our poll results come in, and the question was, do you think promo supply chain issues will improve by the first half of 2022? And about more than 4 in 10, about 46% said that yes, they do think that will happen. 23% no. And then about another 23% said not sure, but probably not. So there is some optimism that better days are around the corner, and hopefully we will see that sooner than later. But as you say, nobody has a crystal ball on it. So Jing, Bob, thank you so much for being with us today. Your insights are invaluable. So thank you both so much.